My name is Sarah Semple. It's Sarahsemple.
And tell me what you are running for.
So I'm running for state representative in the 132nd district for the state house.
As a Republican?
As a Republican, yes.
Okay. So tell me, what is the most important issue to you as we head into November?
You know, I think for the state, the most important issue is education. I think we need to be looking at education funding. One of the things I'd like to see happen is having the money following the students so that we're taking care of students in the way that they need it, not necessarily in a cookie cutter sort of fashion.
What do you mean by following the students?
So I think if you have a student who wants to be in a private school, charter school, homeschooled, those funds should follow the student where they're at. Whatever that student needs is where the money should be.
Okay. What are we doing wrong right now, and what will you do differently if you win?
So I think probably the biggest thing that we're doing wrong right now as a state would be not following the state constitution. When you look at some of the best legislators that we have up there, and they're still only hitting 38% of the votes that they make are constitutional according to the Missouri State Constitution, I think that's a big problem. I'd like to come in and stand with people like Mike Moon and Jeff Pogue and actually follow the Missouri Constitution when passing or voting on legislation.
What is the most important? What is important to the 132nd district?
You know, as I'm going around and knocking on doors and talking to people, I think education is one of the first things I see that is important to them. They're concerned about the schools that their children are attending and whether or not they have any ability to change that. That's probably the number one thing, and then crime is probably the other issue that they're most concerned about. The 132nd district is center Springfield. So if you look at the police reports, that's generally where you're seeing a lot of that high crime come in. So.
What do you believe is top of mind for voters right now? Economy, race, or COVID-19, which is the biggest concern?
Oh my. It's probably somewhere between COVID-19 and race. I think those are the top two things. As far as, if you get past education, a lot of people are concerned about COVID-19. They're concerned either that we have too many regulations or not enough regulations, and they're concerned about how this is going to impact their families. And then, of course, you have a lot of people who are out of work still or on reduced work schedules because of this. So I think COVID-19 is probably the primary one, but how it's impacting the economy is a big problem too.
How would you address COVID-19 and race issues?
It's tough. COVID-19 is tough because I'm not a doctor, right? So you have to listen to the health department, the medical staff around the country, really around the world, and see what they recommend. I think, a lot of people complain about the masking ordinance, and I understand why. I feel like it shouldn't have had to be an ordinance. I think people should be able to be responsible to take care of themselves. But I can also understand why the city was concerned and why they implemented the mask ordinance. I don't know that there's a whole lot we could do now that we're sort of on the tail end or starting to become on the tail end of COVID. I think if we ever had an epidemic or a pandemic like this again, one of the things I'd like to see happen is to adjust how we choose businesses that stay open or stay closed. And instead of closing all the businesses, I think it makes more sense to say, if we're going to close them, all of them need to be closed. If we're going to open them, they can all be open at a certain percentage of capacity. So rather than picking and saying, okay, well, if you happen to be a liquor store or you happen to be whatever, you can open, but everybody else stays closed. We need to make sure that we're protecting all of our citizens, and people who've spent their lives building businesses shouldn't be disenfranchised, any more than they have to be when a health emergency occurs. As far as race, I think the biggest thing to do is to look at, where do we have laws that are maybe systemically racist? What are they, and how can we change them? What can we do to address those so that the system itself is equal for all people? Unfortunately, I don't think there's a way to legislate out of people's hearts racism. The best thing we can do is educate folks and let them know that we're all human. Every one of us, although we have different experiences, we're all still basically fundamentally the same. And as long as our laws are representing that, I think that's, and as a legislator, I think that's probably the biggest thing, is to look at the laws and how we can make sure that those are fair for all.
How would you reassure voters you will fight for what they want?
You know, I will fight for what they want, and I also want them to know that I'll be fighting for what's constitutional. So sometimes those things are at odds, and people want something that's unconstitutional. I would do my best to make sure that they understood if I'm not fighting for that thing, there's a reason why. And if it needs to be changed so that it can be constitutional, or we need to make a change to the Constitution so that it can happen, I think that's where we need to focus. It would be a really great thing if I could give everybody everything that they wanted. But, you know, I want to make sure that people have an open line of communication and we can talk about whatever it is that they're needing. And if I can't give them exactly what they're wanting, hopefully we can find a compromise that will meet their needs.
Why run for office?
Oh, you know, this is a tough one. I did not think that I would run for office. It was not like an ambition that I had. I have thought about giving back in different ways. You know, I volunteer in the community. I've served as an election judge multiple times. And the more I'm doing some of these things and I'm out there and I see that there's kind of a need, especially in this community we have, in my district, we don't have a whole lot of conservative support or viewpoints. And so I wanted to make sure people had a choice in the 132nd district, and they knew that, you know, you're not just stuck with one person to vote for. You can choose. You have more than one option. And really, it's more about giving back and serving than it is about anything that I really necessarily want. I don't have any big political career ambitions. I'd be happy doing this as long as the people will let me, and then going back to my regular life.